My next guest says that there's no doubt that the former president is worried about the outcome of the trial, and you just have to look at the social media posts to see it. Through the holiday weekend and today, Donald Trump attacked the judge, the gag order, and the case itself on his platform, Truth Social. Anthony Scaramucci served briefly as the White House communications director during the Trump administration, and he's the author of the new book, From Wall Street to the White House and Back. Anthony Scaramucci joins me now. So, Anthony, look, we've heard the closing arguments from both sides. Long day for the jury. What do you think? Is Trump closer or further away from an acquittal after today?
Well, he's closer to a conviction, but it'll really be up to the 12 people on the jury. I just want to point out two quick things. Number one, Todd's closing argument had some inconsistencies in it. If he's calling Michael a liar, and again, we're just talking about Michael's testimony now, not previous Michael, the documents and all the other prior testimony corroborate what Michael's saying. Additionally, the $420,000 in fees that they're talking about, it's either legal fees or Michael stole the money. It can't be both. And so I think it's very important to point out those nuances. It's also important to point out that that wasn't his best strategy to go after Michael Cohen. But I guarantee you, Abby, that that was Donald Trump's strategy. I'm certain the same way Costello was brought to the stand because of Donald Trump, the strategy of going after Michael Cohen in those closing arguments was also a Donald Trump strategy. So he's nerved up and he's offering guidance the way a NFL football owner would offer to a coach. And most of the NFL football owners that do that end up blowing the game.
So, I mean, to that point, it was clear at certain points that Trump wanted his attorney to address the jury in the courtroom, but also really the court of public opinion. There were many times, I mean, I was there for those closing statements by the defense where you saw Blanche really disputing things that he probably shouldn't have, most notably that Trump had this affair, that there was sex involved with Stormy Daniels. I mean, what does that do to an attorney's credibility to have him deny something that, frankly, most of the available evidence out there suggests is actually true?
Well, again, so that was a third point that you're bringing up. That you don't give $130,000. I think Senator Romney said it better than I could ever say. You're not paying $130,000 to somebody that you didn't have sex with. But remember, Mr. Trump has two things going on at the same time. He wants to get exonerated from the case, and he wants the lies that he's told his family and the lies that he's told his campaign and his followers to stick as well. And so he's trying to thread that into the case. So for those reasons and other reasons, I think it's beyond a reasonable doubt in terms of the guilt. But again, we know so many people that have gotten off on cases like this, and we'll have to see what the jury says. But that was 3 or 4 direct inconsistencies, Abby, and all of those were driven by Donald Trump.
So today in the courtroom were Eric Trump, Donald Trump Jr., and Tiffany Trump. But it's really about who we haven't been seeing there. We haven't seen Ivanka. We have not seen Melania Trump. What do we make of that?
Well, in fairness to Ivanka, I think she has more or less stated from the beginning that she has had her stay in Washington, doesn't want to be involved with the campaign. I think as it relates to the former First Lady, I think this is prima facie a very tough place for her to be given the facts of this case. And so it's understandable to me why she isn't there. And you're just proving my point further, the reasons why Mr. Trump wanted his attorney to say the things that he said in the court to make sure it got into the transcript.
So you have a new book, From Wall Street to the White House and Back, and you talk about the lessons that you learned throughout your career, including in your very brief stay in the White House. What was the biggest lesson, the biggest takeaway of working for Donald Trump in the White House? But I should note, for people who are not familiar with you, you went into the White House briefly, but you were by Trump's side for a long time before that. What did you learn from that experience?
Well, listen, I worked on that campaign. I did 70 or so campaign stops with the candidate, now the former president. I also did hundreds of hours of media advocacy on behalf of the campaign. But the thing I learned, and the central thing that I learned, is that if you go with your ego and your pride and your decision making, it can have devastating consequences to yourself. And there's a very close personal friend of mine, I won't name him, but he was interviewed for a series of jobs. And he wanted the job desperately and he wanted to serve the country. But after meeting with Trump for 5 or 6 hours, he came to the conclusion that it wasn't the right fit for him in terms of their two personalities. And that was great self-awareness, great maturity on that person's part. And while this doesn't reflect well on me, I do put it in the book. I made that decision based on pride. I made that decision based on ego. And listen, it costs me. But I think the other lesson in the book is that you have to live your life without regrets. I don't wake up in the morning with a millstone of regret on my neck thinking about what happened back then. I'm more interested in learning from it, sharing what I learned with other people, but I'm also more interested in getting on record what I saw and what the former president is capable of, because I think it's a danger to the country. I think he represents a systemic threat to the country, and whether or not I can influence the election or not, it really doesn't matter, Abby. It's more important for me and for the reflection on my family that I get on record what I saw, what the danger is, and so people can make that choice come November, whatever they want to make it. But it's very important for me, and again, there's 40 of us that feel the same way, including the Vice President of the United States that was on the ballot with him 2 times. So,
yeah, I mean,
so those are the lessons.
You took the words out of my
Take
mouth.
your ego out of it.
You join a very long list of former Trump officials, people who have worked for him, who don't want to see him back in the White House, and that's incredibly notable. Anthony Scaramucci, always great to have you on the show. Thank you.
Hey, good to be on.